I'm Alara Vance, 32 years old, and for 7 relentless years, I poured my soul into the family business, Thorn Timberworks. I worked longer, harder, smarter, all to prove I was worthy of carrying my father's legacy. And I thought I'd finally made it. The day I shook hands on the biggest deal of my career, a project that could redefine sustainable building in Colorado. But just hours later, I got a 15-second voicemail. "You're out. Your access has been revoked. Do not come to the office." My entire future stripped away before I even finished my coffee. But what they didn't know was that voicemail didn't break me, it built me. It's proof that sometimes losing everything is exactly how you find yourself. Before I tell you how I rebuilt my life and my legacy, drop a comment if you've ever been blindsided by someone you trusted. And hit that like and subscribe button if you believe that rock bottom isn't the end. It's the foundation. It started, as these stories often do, with a seemingly ordinary Tuesday. The kind of Tuesday you don't realize is about to rip your world apart. I was sitting in a bustling coffee shop, the aroma of roasted beans filling the air, the low hum of conversations and the clatter of ceramic cups a comforting backdrop. My phone buzzed, a familiar jolt against my palm. My father's name, Victor Thorn, glowed on the screen. A wave of anticipation washed over me. Perfect timing. I'd just come from what felt like the most pivotal meeting of my career. David Stone, the CEO of Summit EcoCorp, had practically shaken my hand on what could be our largest commercial contract to date. A sprawling campus of net-zero energy office buildings, designed to be a beacon of environmental responsibility in the heart of the Rockies. My vision, my passion, my proposal. But the call didn't ring through. It went straight to voicemail. Odd. My smile faltered slightly. I picked up the phone to dial back, but before I could, the voicemail notification popped up. I pressed play, holding the device to my ear, still flushed with the success of the morning. I expected a congratulatory message, maybe an excited, "Call me." Instead, my father's voice, usually a booming resonance that filled any room, was flat, mechanical. Each word, a deliberate hammer blow. "Alara," he began. No greeting, no preamble. "The board met this morning. We've decided to restructure the company leadership, effective immediately. You're out of Thorn Timberworks. Your access has been revoked. Your position has been filled. Do not come to the office. Do not call back. Your personal items will be delivered to your apartment. This is a final decision." The message clicked off. 15 seconds. That's all it took. 7 years of 70-hour weeks. Millions in new contracts. My entire identity. Gone. Just like that. I sat there, frozen, the phone still pressed to my ear. The barista called my name from the counter, but her voice sounded distant, as if I were underwater. I slowly lowered the phone, staring at the blank screen as if it might offer an explanation the curt message had withheld. My mind raced through a kaleidoscope of impossible scenarios. Was this a joke? A mistake? Had his phone been stolen? But I knew his voice. The deliberate, measured tone he used when decisions were non-negotiable. The one that ended all arguments. A physical pain bloomed in my chest, sharp and cold, like someone had reached inside and squeezed my heart. My breath caught, becoming shallow, ragged. Around me, the world continued its routine. People chatted animatedly, their laughter like foreign sounds. Laptops clicked, espresso machines hissed. My world, however, had just imploded. The barista called my name again, more insistently this time. I stood on unsteady legs, feeling strangely detached, a puppet responding to an unseen string. I collected my steaming latte, thanking her automatically, my lips forming the words while my mind screamed. Back at my table, I set the untouched cup down. It felt too heavy. What do you say to being discarded? To having your life's work, your future, your very essence, stripped away in a 15-second voicemail? I could call and demand explanations. I could drive to the office and make a scene. I could cry, scream, beg. Instead, I opened my messaging app. My fingers, trembling slightly but resolute, typed a single word. Understood. Then I hit send. I gathered my things, left the untouched coffee on the table, and walked out into the boulder drizzle. The cool mist kissed my face, but I felt nothing. just a hollow ache where my future used to be. Thorn Timberworks wasn't just a company to me. It was my inheritance, my future, and my home. Growing up in Boulder, I practically breathed sawdust and blueprint paper from the moment I could walk. My father, Victor Thorn, started the business 40 years ago with nothing but an old pickup truck, a well-worn toolbox, and a relentless, almost frightening work ethic. My mother, Sylvie, a gentle soul who preferred the quiet artistry of her garden to the cacophony of construction sites, always said he had timber in his veins instead of blood. Some of my earliest memories are of Dad, hoisting me onto his shoulders at construction sites, pointing out framing and foundation work. "See how it all starts, Ilara," he'd say, his voice rumbling against my small body. Everything needs a solid foundation. He taught me to see not just the raw materials, but the potential structure, the living space, the home. By age 10, I could read blueprints almost as well as I could read a storybook. By 14, I was helping with the accounting during summer breaks, the rhythmic click of the calculator a strangely soothing sound. The business was in my DNA. It wasn't just a career path, it was a birthright, a calling. When college application time rolled around, there was never really a question about my trajectory. I attended the University of Colorado Boulder, double majoring in business administration and architectural sustainability. I graduated summa cum laude, gave the student commencement speech, a nervous but exhilarating moment, and had job offers from 3 national construction firms before I even tossed my cap into the autumn air. Firms that offered prestige, higher starting salaries, and a clear path to corporate ascension. My father acted surprised when I told him I was turning them all down to join Thorn Timberworks. "Are you sure, Ilara? Those are impressive offers," he'd said, his voice feigning concern, but the pride in his eyes was unmistakable, a warm glow that filled the room. We both knew where I belonged. This was my destiny, the legacy I was born to uphold and expand. I started in project management, deliberately avoiding any hint of nepotism. I worked harder than anyone on the site, arriving before dawn, the crisp mountain air biting at my cheeks, and leaving well after dark, long after the last construction light had flickered off. I wanted to earn my place, not have it handed to me. The crews respected me, not because I was the boss's daughter, but because I knew what I was talking about. I could read plans, solve problems on the fly, and I never, ever asked anyone to do something I wouldn't do myself. If it meant hauling lumber or digging a trench to understand the process, I did it. Sweat and grit were my currency. When I pointed out inefficiencies in our supply chain that were costing us thousands, Dad promoted me to operations manager. It wasn't a handout. It was recognition of quantifiable value. By the time I was 32, my early 30s, as the saying goes, I was chief operating officer, and Thorn Timberworks had expanded from boutique custom residential projects to larger mixed-use commercial developments across the Mountain West. Our revenue had more than doubled in the 7 years since I joined full-time. My innovative approaches to project management, my insistence on integrating cutting-edge sustainable building practices, from passive solar design to recycled materials, had positioned us as respected leaders in our niche. We weren't just building structures. We were building a reputation for thoughtful, responsible development. My family dynamics, however, were more complicated. My mother, Sylvie Thorn, was always supportive in her quiet way, preferring to stay in the background, a grounding force. She managed the home front, a haven of calm, while Dad built the empire, and she rarely voiced opinions about business matters. She was proud of me, certainly, but she also seemed to carry a subtle worry about my total dedication to the company, as if she sensed the razor's edge I walked between passion and obsession. Then there was my brother, Julian, 3 years older, but somehow always a step behind. He had the Thorn name and my father's square jaw, but none of his drive, or perhaps none of his disciplined focus. Julian worked in client relations, and while he was charismatic enough to bring in new clients, charming them with his easy smile and grand promises, he notoriously lacked follow-through. I often had to clean up his messes, promises made that our teams couldn't reasonably deliver, quotes given without consulting with engineering or procurement first, leading to headaches and cost overruns. Yet Dad had a soft spot for him, a paternal indulgence I could never quite understand. "He'll grow into it, Ilara," Dad would say, with a dismissive wave of his hand. often after I'd flagged another of Julian's missteps. Not everyone hits the ground running like you did. Despite Julian's shortcomings, Dad had always been clear about one thing. Someday, Alara, this will all be yours and your brother's. Equal partners, a Thorn legacy. I believed him completely. Why wouldn't I? I dedicated my life to ensuring that legacy would thrive, not just in size, but in reputation and integrity. Last year, we broke ground on our most ambitious project yet, Thorn Peak Vista, a mixed-use development in downtown Boulder focused on eco-luxury and community integration. It was largely my vision: residential units above vibrant retail spaces, all constructed with locally sourced, low-impact materials, geothermal heating, rainwater collection systems, and communal green spaces designed to foster a sense of belonging. Thorn Peak Vista would be our flagship achievement, the project that would cement our reputation as forward-thinking, environmentally responsible builders. At the groundbreaking ceremony, Dad handed me the golden shovel, its weight surprisingly light in my hands. "This one's your baby, Alara," he'd proclaimed for all to hear, his voice brimming with pride. The future of Thorn Timberworks. I remembered the feel of that shovel, how right it felt in my hands, how clear my path forward seemed. That night, at the celebration dinner, Dad raised a toast. "To Alara," he boomed, his eyes sparkling, "who sees not just what buildings can be, but what they should be." Everyone applauded, even Julian smiled, though his eyes didn't quite reach that genuine warmth. How could I have known then that within 6 months, I'd be standing in a coffee shop, staring at my phone, locked out of the future I'd helped build? The foundation I thought was solid had fault lines I never detected, and they were about to crack wide open. Looking back, I can pinpoint when things began to shift, though at the time, the changes were subtle enough to dismiss as normal business adjustments. It started about 3 months before that fateful voicemail, during our quarterly planning meeting. I'd prepared an extensive presentation on expanding our eco-friendly materials usage across all projects. The numbers supported it. Our sustainable builds were commanding premium prices and generating positive press. It was a win-win. But when I pulled up the slides, Dad glanced at his watch. "Let's table this for now, Alara," he'd said, his voice curt. "We've got more pressing matters." He never specified what those matters were. Just a vague hand wave, a dismissive flick of the wrist. That same week, I noticed Dad and Julian having lunch together. Not unusual in itself. They were father and son, after all. But these lunches became daily occurrences. They'd stop talking when I approached their table, their voices abruptly hushed. "Just some father-son catch-up," Dad would say, with that same dismissive wave. A tight smile on his face. A prickle of unease started to form in the back of my mind. Then came the introduction of Marcus Sterling, my father's old fraternity brother from college, a semi-retired executive from a national construction corporation, a man whose reputation for ruthless efficiency preceded him. Dad brought him in as a strategic consultant without discussing it with me first. "Marcus has 40 years in the business," Dad explained when I questioned the decision, a defensive edge to his voice. "He'll help us navigate this expansion phase." Marcus was tall, silver-haired, with a forced joviality that grated on my nerves, the kind of man who laughed loudest at his own jokes, a booming, insincere sound. He made himself at home in our offices, a pervasive presence, reviewing our contracts, examining our processes, and asking pointed, almost invasive questions about our client relationships. When I asked to see his reports, Dad told me they were still in development, a convenient delay that always seemed to prevent my oversight. I started noticing small decisions being reversed. A sustainable materials vendor I'd vetted and approved, after weeks of rigorous research and negotiation, was suddenly dropped. A project manager I'd personally hired, a brilliant young woman with a passion for green building, was reassigned to a dead-end administrative role. The innovative marketing campaign I developed for Thorn Peak Vista, highlighting its environmental features, was temporarily shelved. Each time I sought explanations, I received vague responses. "We're reassessing. It's a timing issue. We'll circle back to that one." It was like trying to grasp smoke. The ground beneath me felt like it was subtly shifting, but I couldn't quite see the tremors. One Tuesday afternoon, a particularly bright, crisp Boulder day, I walked into the conference room. expecting to find it empty. Instead, I found my father, Julian, Marcus, and 2 members of our board in a meeting I hadn't been informed about. Blueprints were spread across the large oak table. My blueprints. My heart hammered against my ribs. Modifications. Drastic modifications to the Thorn Peak Vista design that eliminated many of the sustainability features. The very cornerstones of the project's vision. "What's going on here?" I asked, unable to keep the raw edge of disbelief from my voice. Dad looked up, momentarily startled, his eyes wide. "Just exploring some value engineering options, Alara. Nothing final." "Value engineering?" I scoffed, my voice rising. "We're cutting the geothermal array and the rainwater harvesting system? These are cornerstone features of the design. The city approved our permits based on these elements." My voice was a furious whisper now, a desperate attempt to convey the gravity of their proposed changes. Marcus Sterling cleared his throat, his eyes twinkling with a cold amusement. "The initial estimates were perhaps overly optimistic about ROI on these features, Miss Vance. We're simply recalibrating to market realities." "I ran those numbers myself," I countered, my hands flat on the table, trying to keep my voice steady. "They're solid, and we've already ordered materials. We've pre-purchased key components, locking in prices." Dad stood up, effectively ending the discussion. "Alara, we can discuss this later. Marcus has some insights worth considering." He gestured to the door. I felt the room close in on me, the air growing thick. These weren't minor tweaks. This was a fundamental shift away from the vision I'd created and everyone had approved. And I was being excluded from the conversation about my own project, my own brainchild. That evening, my assistant Chloe, a quiet but sharp woman who saw everything, asked to speak with me privately. We walked to a nearby park. The distant flatirons bathed in the last golden light of the setting sun, away from the office, away from prying eyes. "I probably shouldn't tell you this," she said, glancing around as if worried about being overheard. Her voice was low, strained. "But they've been having meetings. Your dad, Julian, and Mr. Sterling. Almost every day when you're out visiting sites." She paused, chewing her lip. "And Mr. Sterling's son, Leo, has been in twice for interviews." "Interviews for what position?" A cold dread began to coil in my stomach. Chloe looked uncomfortable. "They didn't say specifically, but they were showing him around like he was already hired. Your office was part of the tour." I tried to rationalize. Perhaps they were bringing in additional management for the expansion, though that still didn't explain the secrecy. But why the secrecy? Why not include me in these discussions? Especially if a new executive was being brought on board. I was the COO. That weekend, I stopped by my parents' house for our monthly family dinner, a tradition stretching back decades. Mom seemed distracted, checking her phone frequently, her eyes darting nervously. When Dad stepped out to take a call, another one of those suspiciously private calls, she leaned close to me, her voice a hushed whisper. "Alara, be careful." "What do you mean, Mom?" My heart pounded. "Just watch your back. Your father's... he's not thinking clearly lately." Before she could elaborate, Dad returned, his presence filling the room, and she immediately changed the subject to her garden club. Her words rushed and forced. I tried to catch her alone again that evening, but she avoided being alone with me, her eyes flitting away whenever I tried to meet them. As I was leaving, she hugged me tighter than usual, a suffocating embrace, like she was saying goodbye rather than see you soon. It felt like a premonition. The following week, the signs escalated. I was explicitly excluded from a business dinner with a major potential client. When I asked Dad why, he claimed it was just a casual meeting, nothing official. Later, I discovered they had signed a preliminary agreement for a luxury condo development, a project type I had specifically advised against due to market saturation and our company's reputation. Each incident in isolation could be explained away, chalked up to miscommunication or internal politics. Together, they formed a chilling pattern, an undeniable trajectory. I was finally beginning to recognize it. Something was happening at Thorn Timberworks, something that apparently didn't include me. But even with these warning signs, these creeping shadows of doubt, I never imagined how quickly or how completely the axe would fall. April 17th began like any other Tuesday. Spring in Boulder meant fickle weather, but the sky had cleared enough for sunlight to break through the lingering clouds as I drove to our newest site. I was meeting with David Stone of Summit EcoCorp, a client interested in a significant commercial project that aligned perfectly with my sustainable building focus. I'd spent the previous week preparing comprehensive proposals, running intricate cost projections, ensuring every detail was meticulously accounted for. This could be our largest contract yet, a campus of office buildings designed to meet net zero energy standards, aiming for the highest certifications. The meeting went exceptionally well. David Stone, a man known for his astute business sense and his commitment to environmental responsibility, seemed genuinely impressed by the innovative approaches I'd suggested. "Your passion for sustainable building is exactly what we're looking for, Alara," he'd said, his handshake firm and reassuring. "I think Thorn Timberworks is the right partner for us." I called the office immediately afterward, eager to share the good news, but got my father's voicemail. I left an excited message about the potential new contract, the sheer scale of it, the opportunity it represented. Then, feeling a rare moment of lightness and triumph, I decided to treat myself to coffee before heading back. I deserved a small celebration. This deal would add millions to our annual revenue and create jobs for dozens of skilled workers. It felt like the culmination of everything I'd worked for. The coffee shop was busy with the mid-morning rush, a comforting symphony of chatter and clatter. I ordered my usual, a large latte with an extra shot, and found a quiet corner table near the window. The rain had started again, a soft pattering against the glass, creating a serene, almost meditative atmosphere. I pulled out my tablet to review some emails while I waited for my drink, a small, triumphant smile playing on my lips. My phone buzzed. Dad's name appeared on the screen. Perfect timing. I was eager to share the good news about Summit EcoCorp, to hear the pride in his voice. But instead of answering, the call went straight to voicemail. Odd. My brow furrowed. I picked up my phone to call back when the voicemail notification appeared. A flicker of unease, but I dismissed it. Maybe he was in a meeting. I pressed play and held the phone to my ear, still smiling from the successful meeting. Alara, my father's voice was flat, businesslike. A cold, unfeeling tone I'd never heard him use with me before. No greeting, no warmth. "The board met this morning, and we've decided to restructure the company leadership. Effective immediately. You're out of Thorn Timberworks. Your access has been revoked, and your position has been filled. Don't come to the office. Don't call back. Your personal items will be delivered to your apartment. This is a final decision." The message ended. No explanation, no goodbye. Just the mechanical voice asking if I wanted to save or delete the message. I sat frozen, the phone still pressed to my ear, the cold plastic feeling like a shard of ice against my skin. The barista called my name again, her voice a distant echo, like I was submerged underwater. My mind raced, frantically searching for a rational explanation. Was this a joke, a mistake? Had my father's phone been stolen, and this was some twisted prank? But no. I knew his voice, the deliberate, measured tone he used when decisions were non-negotiable, the tone that signaled an unmovable finality. I felt a physical pain in my chest, a sudden, searing pressure, like someone had reached inside and squeezed my heart, twisting it. My breathing became shallow, ragged, each inhale a struggle. Around me, people continued their conversations, oblivious. Laptops clicked, espresso machines hissed, the world continuing in its routine while mine imploded with silent, devastating force. The barista called my name again, more insistently this time. "Latte for Alara?" I stood on unsteady legs, my muscles feeling like jelly, and collected my drink, thanking her automatically, my voice a thin whisper. Back at my table, I set the untouched latte down. It felt too heavy, too permanent, the delicate foam on top, a cruel mockery of the turmoil within me. What does one say to being discarded? To having your life's work, your future, your identity stripped away in a 15-second voicemail? The question screamed in my head, a raw, primal cry. I could call and demand explanations. I could drive to the office and make a scene, storm in and confront them, unleash the torrent of fury building inside me. I could cry, scream, beg. The thoughts flashed through my mind, desperate, chaotic. But then, a strange, defiant calm settled over me, a tiny spark of something resilient, Instead, I opened my messaging app. My hands trembled, but my face remained expressionless, a mask I instinctively pulled on. I typed a single word and hit send. Understood. Then I gathered my things, my purse, my tablet, left my untouched coffee on the table, its warmth mocking the sudden chill in my bones. I walked out into the rain, not looking back. I drove aimlessly for hours, the world outside my car window a blur of grays and greens. My route, by some cruel twist of fate, took me past buildings I'd helped create, the Miller offices with their distinctive curved facade, the renovated Parkside lofts that had won us a design award, the elementary school we rebuilt after the devastating fire, completed ahead of schedule so kids could return to familiar classrooms, to some semblance of normalcy. Each building was a chapter of my story, a physical manifestation of my dedication and vision. Now they stood as monuments to what I'd lost, stark reminders of a legacy ripped away. Eventually, I found myself parked outside my apartment building, a converted warehouse with exposed brick and tall windows, nestled in a quiet, tree-lined street. I'd chosen it for its proximity to the office, 15 minutes, door to door. What did proximity matter now? Inside, my apartment felt suddenly alien, cold. Photos of family gatherings on the bookshelf, snapshots of smiling faces that now felt like strangers. The intricate model of our first commercial project Dad had given me when we won the bid. The hard hat with Thorn Timberworks, printed on the side that I'd worn on countless sites, its plastic shell now feeling like a hollow mockery. I poured myself a large glass of wine, the ruby liquid sloshing in the glass, a poor attempt at comfort. I sat on my balcony as darkness fell over Boulder. Lights flickered on across the city, homes where families gathered, businesses where people were finishing their normal Tuesday, completely unaware that Alara Vance's world had just collapsed. Silent and complete. My phone remained silent. No calls from Mom. No texts from colleagues wondering where I'd disappeared to. Nothing, just that devastating voicemail, replaying in an endless loop in my mind, and my one-word response, floating in digital space between my father and me. Understood. Not why, not how could you, not please reconsider, just acknowledgement, acceptance, because in that raw moment of shock and betrayal, it was the only power I had left. The power to deny him the satisfaction of my pleading or my anger. The power to control my own reaction, even if it was just a single word. I slept fitfully that night, if you could call it sleep, waking frequently, my heart pounding, half convinced it had all been a nightmare, a cruel trick of my exhausted mind. But morning came, and reality remained unchanged. I was out, with no warning, no conversation, no chance to defend myself, just cut off like a gangrenous limb from the Thorn family body. The days following the voicemail blurred together into a hazy, indistinguishable stretch of pain and disbelief. I woke the next morning with a momentary amnesia, reaching for my phone to check work emails, a habitual reflex, before the harsh reality crashed back, a physical blow. Out of habit, driven by some desperate, illogical hope, I tried to log into the company system anyway. Access denied flashed on the screen, a digital slap in the face. My company credit card was declined when I tried to buy coffee. My key card wouldn't open the office building doors, the electronic beep a mocking sound. It was as if someone had systematically erased my professional existence overnight, a carefully executed digital purge. My personal phone, however, buzzed constantly with texts and calls from confused clients and colleagues. David Stone from yesterday's meeting. Alara, I'm hearing strange things. Call me. Suppliers we had built years of relationships with. Is it true you've left Thorn Timberworks? Project managers looking for direction on ongoing work. We need you back here. What's going on? I couldn't bring myself to answer. What would I say? That I'd been fired via voicemail? That I had no idea why? That after 7 years of unwavering dedication, I'd been discarded without explanation? The shame and confusion were too overwhelming. On the third day, when I still hadn't heard from a single family member, not a call, not a text, not even a cryptic message, I called Mom. Straight to voicemail. I tried the house phone. No answer. I even tried Julian, though we'd never been close. Our relationship always strained by his quiet resentment. Nothing. It was as if I'd died. And no one had bothered with a funeral. The silence was deafening, a new form of torture. By day 5, I was desperate for information, for a single thread of truth to grasp onto. I texted Chloe, my former assistant, asking if she could meet me. We arranged to meet at a diner across town, far from the office, far from any prying eyes. She arrived looking nervous, her eyes darting around the room, glancing over her shoulder as she slid into the booth opposite me. "I'm not supposed to be talking to you," she said immediately, her voice hushed. They made everyone sign non-disclosure agreements about the transition. "Chloe, what happened?" I pleaded, leaning forward, my voice barely above a whisper. "I need to know." She fidgeted with her napkin, her fingers pleating the thin paper into intricate folds. "It all happened so fast. Monday afternoon, after you left for the Summit EcoCorp meeting, they called an all-hands meeting. Your father announced that the company was returning to its roots, focusing purely on luxury residential development." She paused, taking a breath. Then he introduced Leo Sterling as the new COO, Sterling's son. The pieces, cold and sharp, started clicking into place. "Yes," Chloe confirmed, her voice barely audible. "Apparently, he's been shadowing different departments for weeks. Then your father said you decided to pursue other opportunities, and that all communication should go through Leo or Julian from now on." "That's a lie," I said, the words a raw whisper. "I was fired by voicemail. After the most successful client meeting of my career." Chloe looked pained, her eyes filled with a mixture of pity and fear. "There's more, Ilara. They're systematically dismantling everything you built. The sustainability initiatives, the community partnerships, the diverse hiring practices, all being rolled back. Thorn Peak Vista has been completely redesigned. No green features, just luxury condos with premium price tags." I felt physically ill, a wave of nausea washing over me. My vision, my passion, reduced to a hollow, soulless shell. But why? Those initiatives were profitable. They differentiated us in the market. "Marcus Sterling convinced your father that luxury development is where the quick money is," Chloe explained, her voice barely above a whisper. "Less regulation, higher margins." She hesitated, glancing around again. "And there's something about your father's health. I overheard him talking about treatments. Dad's sick. Why wouldn't he tell me?" A new layer of betrayal, sharp and unexpected. "I don't know details," Chloe admitted, shaking her head. "Just that he's been having private conversations about medical options." As Chloe continued filling in the blanks, the full horrifying picture emerged. Marcus Sterling had orchestrated a complete company takeover from within, positioning his son, Leo, as my replacement. My brother, Julian, always jealous of my closer relationship with the crews and my performance record, had allied with them. Together, they'd convinced my father that the company needed to change direction, away from my vision of sustainable, community-focused construction, back to luxury projects with quick, undeniable returns. It was a hostile corporate coup, executed with chilling precision, and I, the heir apparent, had been the primary target. "One more thing," Chloe said quietly, her voice barely a whisper. "When I came in yesterday, your office was completely cleared out. They had a courier service deliver boxes to your apartment building. Did you get them?" I hadn't. When I returned home, the building felt heavy, imbued with a sense of loss. I checked with my doorman. Sure enough, 4 large boxes had been delivered that morning. I carried them up one by one, feeling like I was transporting pieces of a corpse. Inside were the artifacts of my professional life, haphazardly packed. Family photos, some with cracked frames, industry awards, tossed in without care. The resilient little succulent I'd kept alive on my desk for 5 years. Its soil spilled throughout the box. My degrees, unceremoniously removed from the wall, creased and bent. Client thank you notes, crumpled into forgotten corners. At the bottom of the last box was a legal document, a separation agreement, thick and cold, waiving all claims against Thorn Timberworks in exchange for 3 months' severance pay. A yellow sticky note, in my father's familiar, precise handwriting, was affixed to the top page. "Sign and return for payment." I let the paper fall from my hands, fluttering to the floor like a dead leaf. It was an insult, a final, crushing blow. That evening, the shock finally gave way to a cold, burning resolve. I started my investigation in earnest. I called a former classmate, a brilliant woman named Maya, who worked at a competing construction firm across the state. "Have you heard anything about Thorn Timberworks recently?" I asked, trying to keep my voice casual. "Actually, yes," she replied, a hint of curiosity in her tone. "Word is they're pivoting hard to luxury development, and there are rumors about financial trouble, trying to secure major funding for something. Someone said your dad has been looking to sell controlling interest." This was news to me. Our finances had been solid. I'd reviewed the books myself just weeks ago, every ledger entry meticulously scrutinized. How could it have devolved so quickly? I created a timeline of events, working backward from the voicemail. The arrival of Marcus Sterling, the secret meetings, the gradual sidelining of my projects, the introduction of Leo. It wasn't a sudden decision, I realized with chilling clarity. It was a calculated coup that had been in motion for months, orchestrated with predatory precision, while I worked obliviously to grow the company, to build its future. The most painful revelation came when I accessed my personal email and found messages from clients expressing confusion about changes I'd supposedly authorized. Contracts had been modified, promises walked back. My name, my hard-earned reputation, had been used to justify decisions I never made, to dismantle everything I'd built. They hadn't just removed me, they'd weaponized my name, twisting it into a tool for their own agenda. It was an act of professional assassination. I consulted with an attorney, Brenda Olson, a sharp, no-nonsense woman who specialized in family business disputes. After reviewing my situation, she delivered a harsh reality check. "When you joined the company, Alara, did you sign any employment contracts, shareholder agreements, operating documents?" I had, of course, standard paperwork. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary at the time. "Yes, of course," Brenda nodded, flipping through the documents I'd brought. "These documents," she said, pointing to specific clauses with a practiced finger, "effectively limit your recourse. You agreed that the board, which your father controls, has sole discretion over operations and personnel. You have no guaranteed position despite being family, and this non-compete clause," she tapped a finger on a particularly dense paragraph, "prevents you from working with any Thorn Timberworks clients for 2 years. "But there must be something," I stammered, my voice cracking. "Wrongful termination? Defamation," Brenda sighed, her expression grim. "Family businesses operate in gray areas, Alara. They counted on your trust, and unfortunately, you gave it to them completely. Legally, your options are extremely limited. It's a closed system, designed to protect the controlling interest." I left her office feeling defeated, hollowed out. Not only had I lost my job, and it seemed my family in one blow, but I'd unknowingly signed away my right to fight back. My own ambition, my own belief in the system, had become my unwitting undoing. 2 weeks after the voicemail, I reached my breaking point. No communication from anyone in my family. Rumors spreading through the industry about my departure, whispers that painted me as either incompetent or disloyal. Clients I'd nurtured relationships with for years, now unreachable, their calls going straight to Julian or Leo. I decided direct confrontation was my only option, however futile. I drove to my parents' house on a Sunday evening, family dinner night for as long as I could remember. As I approached, I saw cars in the driveway, a sight that used to fill me with warmth. My father's Range Rover, my mother's Volvo, Julian's sleek sports car, and then 2 unfamiliar vehicles, a luxury sedan and a large black SUV. One, I surmised, likely belonged to Marcus Sterling. The other, perhaps, to Leo. They were having family dinner without me. I parked across the street, the engine still running, and sat watching the house through the dining room windows. The warm glow of the chandelier illuminated the scene within. I could see them gathered around the large antique table, Mom, her movements strangely subdued, passing dishes. Dad at the head of the table where he always sat, his expression grim. Julian gesturing expansively as he spoke, his usual bravado on full display. And there were the Sterlings. Marcus, his silver hair gleaming, and a younger man, dark-haired and sharp-featured, who must be Leo, my replacement. They were laughing, eating, existing, as if I'd never been part of their lives. As if my absence wasn't a gaping hole at the table, I almost stormed in, almost pounded on the door, demanding answers, demanding to know how they could do this. But something stopped me. A strange calm, cold and hard, settled over me as I watched this tableau of betrayal. They had made their choice. Creating a scene wouldn't change that. It would only give them the satisfaction of seeing my pain, of confirming their narrative that I was out of control, volatile. I started the car and drove away, my resolve hardening with each forced smile I saw through the glass. This wasn't about pleading anymore. This was about something else entirely. The next day, a text appeared on my phone screen. "Coffee tomorrow? Just us." It was from my mother, Sylvie, a flicker of hope or perhaps dread. I agreed. We met at a small, unassuming cafe nestled in a quiet part of Boulder, far from both the Thorn Timberworks offices and my parents' home. A neutral ground. Mom looked tired, older somehow. The lines around her eyes were deeper, etched with worry. When she hugged me, she held on longer than usual, her embrace fragile, as if she might break. "I'm so sorry, Alara," she said, her voice thin once we were seated. "This isn't what I wanted." "Then why is it happening, Mom? Why didn't you warn me?" The words tumbled out, raw and accusatory. She glanced around nervously, her eyes flitting to the other patrons, then back to me. "Your father isn't well. His heart. The doctors found blockages, severe ones. He needs surgery, and the recovery will be lengthy." Her voice trembled. "He started panicking about the company's future, about what would happen if he couldn't be there. And that meant cutting you out completely." "Mom, that makes no sense." My mind reeled. His health? I loved my father, despite everything. Why hadn't he told me? How does his illness equate to firing me? She wouldn't meet my eyes. Marcus convinced him that you were planning your own takeover, that you'd use his illness as an opportunity to push Julian out completely, to take everything for yourself. "That's absurd. I sputtered, indignant. "Marcus had evidence, Alara. Emails, meeting notes, conversations with clients about new leadership when your father stepped down." Her voice was barely a whisper. I was speechless. "Those were succession planning discussions, Mom. Dad asked me to have them. He told me to start preparing for a transition in the next 5 years. He told me to reach out to clients and prepare them for a future without his day-to-day involvement, to reassure them the company was in good hands." Marcus presented it differently, she said. Her voice resigned. "And your brother?" She trailed off, unable to meet my gaze. "Julian helped them, didn't he?" I knew the answer, but the confirmation still stung. "He's always resented that Dad trusted me with operations instead of him." Mom didn't deny it. Her silence was a confirmation. "Marcus offered a solution. His son Leo could step in during your father's recovery, with Julian handling client relationships. A return to family values was how Marcus phrased it. A more traditional, streamlined business model. Less focused on the experimental." "And what about me, Mom? I am family," the words tasted like ash. "Your father thinks you've changed, Alara. All the sustainability focus, the community projects. He says it's not what Thorn Timberworks was built for. Marcus convinced him you were turning his company into something he wouldn't recognize, something that threatened his legacy." The betrayal cut deeper with each revelation. My father, the man who taught me about foundations and integrity, had been manipulated. His own fears, his own illness, had been weaponized against him, used to paint me as disloyal for trying to evolve the company, to make it stronger, more relevant for the future. And rather than talking to me directly, he'd chosen to believe the worst, to discard me without a word, without a chance. "Why a voicemail, Mom?" I asked, my voice breaking. "After everything I've given to the company, to this family, why couldn't he even tell me to my face?" She looked away, her eyes glistening. "He was afraid you'd talk him out of it. You've always been persuasive, Alara. He couldn't risk facing you directly." As our conversation continued, the full extent of the sabotage unraveled. Julian, fueled by years of simmering resentment and jealousy, had been systematically undermining me for months, collecting out-of-context statements, twisting my words in reports to our father. Marcus Sterling had manufactured evidence, carefully constructing a narrative suggesting I was secretly planning to start my own company, and poach Thorn Timberworks clients. The final straw, Mom recounted, her voice barely a whisper, was when Marcus showed your father an email where you supposedly discussed moving client relationships away from Thorn Timberworks. Your father saw it as the ultimate betrayal. He thought you were stealing his company from under him as he lay vulnerable. That email doesn't exist, Mom. It's fabricated. My heart ached, a deep bruising pain. I believe you, Ilara, but your father doesn't, or won't. He's scared, Ilara. Facing mortality does strange things to people. We parted with another long hug, a silent acknowledgement of the chasm that now lay between us. I'll try to talk to him, she promised, her voice catching, when he's stronger, after the surgery. But we both knew it was too late. The damage was done. The foundation was shattered beyond repair. In the following weeks, the true extent of the sabotage became chillingly clear. Former colleagues reached out secretly, risking their jobs, to tell me that Julian and Leo were systematically dismantling my professional reputation. They implied I'd mismanaged projects, made promises the company couldn't keep, alienated key stakeholders. My name was removed from the company website, my accomplishments erased from the corporate history. Projects I'd spearheaded were now attributed to the Thorn Timberworks team, a faceless entity. The sustainability initiatives I'd championed were being marketed as Julian's brainchild, though they were being scaled back significantly, reduced to mere greenwashing. The financial strain began to hit hard. My savings, while substantial, weren't infinite. I'd always reinvested most of my bonuses back into company stock I now couldn't sell due to restrictive transfer limitations buried deep within the paperwork I'd signed years ago. The severance offer, that paltry 3 months' pay, remained unsigned on my counter. Accepting it meant validating their version of events, admitting some form of complicity. But pride wouldn't pay my mortgage. Industry contacts who'd once been eager to collaborate now wouldn't return my calls. The non-compete agreement, a cruel irony, prevented me from approaching any Thorn Timberworks clients, effectively shutting me out of the very market I knew best. My professional identity had been so thoroughly entwined with the family business that without it, I seemed to disappear, a ghost in my own industry. One evening, a raw, cold Boulder night, I drove past the Thorn Peak Vista site. The sign had been changed. No more sustainable urban living. Now it advertised luxury condominiums from the 800s. All my work, my vision, erased, as if it had never existed. I pulled over, the wipers rhythmically sweeping away the rain, and watched the darkened construction site, tears streaming down my face, hot and stinging. This was the final, undeniable evidence that everything I'd built was being dismantled, brick by brick, board by board. Not just my career, but my legacy, my contribution to a future I believed in. That night, I signed the severance agreement. Not because I accepted their version of events, not because I forgave them, but because I needed to survive long enough to rebuild. It was a tactical retreat, not a surrender. I mailed it the next morning, feeling like I was signing my own professional death certificate. When the check arrived, I couldn't bring myself to deposit it for days. It felt tainted, blood money to buy my silence and disappearance. But eventually, practical necessity won out over principle. The money would buy me time, and time was what I needed most. Time to heal, to plan, and eventually to rise again from the ashes of betrayal. By month 3 after the voicemail, I had truly hit rock bottom. I'd moved from my spacious apartment, with its views of the Flatirons, to a tiny studio in a less desirable neighborhood, a grim exercise in conserving dwindling funds. The severance money, though initially appearing substantial, was vanishing faster than I'd anticipated. Job interviews in the construction industry, initially enthusiastic, mysteriously fell through after a promising start. The Thorn name, once an asset, had become a liability, whispered about as a warning. One rainy night, Boulder has no shortage of those, especially when you're feeling adrift. I sat on the floor of my new apartment, surrounded by half-unpacked boxes, my life still in limbo. I'd been drinking wine straight from the bottle, the bitterness matching the taste in my mouth, scrolling through old photos on my laptop. Projects I'd managed, triumphant team celebrations, awkward but endearing family events at the old office, my life's work. reduced to digital memories and a few cardboard boxes. I reached a photo from the groundbreaking of Thorn Peak Vista. My father's arm around my shoulders, both of us in hard hats, golden shovels in hand, smiling broadly. His smile seemed genuine. Was he already planning to cut me out even then? Had anything in my professional life been real? Had I been a fool all along? In that moment of profound despair, staring at my father's smiling face in a digital frame, I almost gave up completely. I considered leaving Boulder, changing careers entirely, reinventing myself somewhere no one knew the Thorn name, somewhere I could simply disappear. Maybe I could teach construction management at a community college in another state, far from the whispers, or switch to real estate, or abandon the industry entirely and become a park ranger, a baker, anything that put distance between me and the wreckage of my former life. My phone rang, startling me. The sudden vibration a jolt through the quiet apartment. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, my finger hovering over the screen, ready to dismiss it. But some desperate residual hope, a tiny flicker in the darkness, made me pick up. "Ilara Vance?" My voice sounded hollow, even to my own ears. "Ilara, it's Lena Harding." Lena Harding, the owner of Harding Community Initiatives, a smaller, highly respected firm, focused on affordable housing projects and community-driven development. We'd collaborated on a joint venture 2 years earlier, a mixed-income apartment complex that had won several awards for innovative design within tight budget constraints. Her firm was known for its integrity and its commitment to social good. "Lena, this is unexpected. I've been trying to reach you for weeks. Your email bounces back and your cell goes straight to voicemail." Her voice was warm, tinged with concern. I hadn't been checking messages regularly. Too many awkward conversations to navigate. Too much pain to face. "Sorry about that. I've been transitioning." "So I've heard," she said, a gentle understanding in her voice. "Industry gossip travels fast." She paused, then continued, her voice firm. "Listen, I don't know exactly what happened at Thorn, and frankly, I don't care. What I do know is that when we worked together, you were the most competent, innovative project manager I'd ever encountered. You see solutions where others see roadblocks. You connect with people, and your passion for truly sustainable building is rare. For the first time in months, I felt a flicker of my old professional confidence, a small ember stirring in the ashes. "Thank you, Lena. That means a lot right now." My voice was still shaky, but the gratitude was immense. "It's not just flattery, Ilara. I have a proposition for you. We've been awarded a contract for a small community arts center in North Boulder. Tight budget, challenging site, significant sustainability requirements. I immediately thought of you. The possibility of working again, of building something meaningful, something that aligned with my values. It was intoxicating, but fear, that cold, paralyzing fear of failure, still held me captive. "Lena, I appreciate the vote of confidence, but I can't. My non-compete." "I've had my lawyer review it," she interrupted, her voice reassuring. "This wouldn't violate the terms. It's not a Thorn Timberworks client. It's a completely different market segment. And you'd be a consultant, not an employee of a competitor. We could structure it carefully." The temptation was immense, but the wounds were still fresh, the scars raw. "I don't know, Lena. I'm not sure I'm ready to jump back in." "Take some time to think about it," she said gently. "The offer stands. We start preliminary design in 2 weeks. Call me." After we hung up, I stared at the phone in my hand. An opportunity, when I thought all doors were closed to me, when I felt utterly adrift. But did I have the courage to walk through it? Did I have anything left to give? The next day brought another unexpected connection, a beacon in the fog, an email from Arthur Finch, my father's original business partner, who'd retired and sold his stake 20 years ago, long before I was even in college. He'd heard about my departure, industry gossip, again, and wanted to meet. We met at his home, a modest, welcoming house with an impressive workshop in the back, where he still built custom furniture as a hobby. At 75, Arthur remained sharp and direct, his eyes keen and perceptive. "Your father's making the same mistake he made with me," he said after minimal pleasantries, his voice gravelly but kind. pushing out the person who could take the company forward because he's afraid of change, afraid of anything he can't fully control. Arthur shared a history I'd never known, a narrative carefully excluded from my family lore. He recounted how he and my father had clashed over expansion plans in the early days, how my father had subtly maneuvered to dilute Arthur's ownership until selling made more sense than fighting, how their 40-year friendship had ended over business disagreements. "Your father builds beautiful structures, Alara," Arthur said, his gaze fixed on a distant point, a faraway memory in his eyes. "But he tears down relationships with the same efficiency. He can't stand anyone challenging his vision, even when that vision has become outdated, stagnant." As we talked, Arthur revealed he had kept meticulous journals throughout his career, a habit born from a desire to document his experiences, to learn from every triumph and setback. He retrieved a worn wooden box from his workshop, filled with several leather-bound notebooks, their pages yellowed with age. "You might find some perspective in these, Alara," he said, handing them to me, the weight of history in my hands. History has a way of repeating itself in family businesses. That night, back in my tiny studio, I started reading Arthur's journals. They detailed the early days of Thorn Timberworks, originally Finch and Thorn Builders, including a strikingly familiar pattern. My grandfather, Silas Thorn, had forced out his own brother, Jasper, in the family's previous construction business, nearly 50 years earlier, using alarmingly similar tactics of isolation and accusations of disloyalty. It was a generational pattern, a cruel cyclical inheritance. The Thorn men built businesses, it seemed, and burned bridges with equal dedication, driven by a deep-seated fear of losing control, of their legacy slipping through their fingers. The journals gave me something unexpected: distance. For the first time, I could see my situation not as a personal failure, not as a reflection of my worth, but as part of a dysfunctional family pattern that preceded me, stretching back through generations. My father wasn't just betraying me. He was repeating behavior he'd learned from his own father, from his own family's ingrained anxieties. Understanding didn't erase the pain, but it helped me separate myself from it, to externalize the hurt. This wasn't about my performance or my inherent value. It was about fear of change, fear of loss of control, fear of mortality, fears that had nothing to do with me and everything to do with the Thorn legacy of mistrust and a desperate grip on power. It was a broken pattern, and I was merely the latest victim in its grim dance. The next morning, the bolder sky a clear, crisp blue, I called Lena Harding and accepted her consulting offer. The fear was still there, a cold knot in my stomach, but it was now laced with a fierce, defiant purpose. Then I sat down at my small kitchen table with a new notebook, pristine and full of blank possibilities, and began sketching out a business plan. Not for a construction company, the non-compete prevented that, but for a consulting firm specializing in sustainable building practices. Verdant Spire Solutions would offer expertise in eco-friendly materials, energy-efficient design, and innovative sustainable construction methods. I'd target smaller firms like Lena's, lacking in-house sustainability experts, but wanting to compete in an increasingly green-conscious market. Firms that valued integrity and long-term vision over quick profits. Starting over was terrifying. I had no clients beyond Lena, limited capital, and a reputation that had been systematically undermined. But I had knowledge, experience, and now a driving purpose that went beyond family legacy. It was about building something authentic. I registered the business name the next day, created a simple website the day after, ordered business cards with Alara Vance, founder and principal consultant, printed in a simple, professional font. Each small step, each deliberate action, rebuilt a piece of my shattered confidence, laid a new foundation. Lena's Northside Art Center project became my lifeline. I threw myself into it completely, pouring every ounce of my expertise and passion into its creation. I researched innovative materials that could meet both stringent sustainability goals and a challenging budget constraints. I developed ingenious alternatives to expensive systems, using creative combinations of passive design elements and efficient space planning. I worked harder than I ever had at Thorn Timberworks, knowing this project would make or break my new venture. This wasn't just a project. It was my proving ground. When we presented the final design to the community board, their enthusiastic approval felt like validation. A deep, resonant chord struck within me, not just of my work, but of my professional identity beyond the Thorn name. One board member, a kind-faced woman with sparkling eyes, approached me afterward. "We've been trying to make this work for years, Alara," she said, her voice filled with relief. "But the big firms either couldn't meet our budget or wouldn't prioritize our sustainability goals. You found a way to do both. Beautifully." Her words were the first unequivocal professional praise I'd received since the voicemail. I realized, in that moment, that I'd been holding my breath for months, waiting for someone to confirm I still had value without the Thorn backing, without the family name to prop me up. That evening, I drove to the construction site of what would become the Northside Arts Center. Just plywood and concrete foundations now, stark against the fading light. But I could envision the finished building, solar panels that doubled as shade structures, rainwater collection feeding the community garden, reclaimed timber from a demolished warehouse forming the central gathering space, a testament to renewal. I placed my hand on a newly poured foundation wall, still slightly warm from the curing process, solid and steadfast. Everything needs a solid foundation, my father had taught me long ago. He'd been talking about buildings, but the lesson applied to life as well. I was pouring a new foundation now, not of concrete and steel, but of integrity, independence, and resilience. For the first time since that coffee shop moment when my world collapsed, I felt genuinely hopeful about the future. Not the future I'd planned, but perhaps the one I needed. A future I was building myself, one carefully placed brick at a time, one deliberate, courageous step at a time. 1 year after the voicemail that had shattered my world, I stood in a bustling hotel ballroom at the Pacific Northwest Sustainable Building Awards. Verdant Spire Solutions had been nominated for Innovation in Community-Focused Design for the Northside Arts Center. The center had opened 2 months earlier to enthusiastic community response. We'd come in under budget and exceeded energy efficiency projections. Most importantly, the space had immediately become a vibrant hub for the neighborhood, exactly what we'd envisioned. When they announced, "And the winner is Verdant Spire Solutions for the Northside Arts Center," the applause felt like validation of the hardest year of my life, a thunderous affirmation that I had not only survived, but thrived. As I accepted the gleaming glass trophy, its weight substantial in my hand, I scanned the audience out of habit, half expecting to see my father or brother, a flicker of that old, ingrained hope. They weren't there, of course. Thorn Timberworks had stopped attending industry events focused on sustainability, their new direction pulling them away from the very principles I had championed. My acceptance speech was brief, heartfelt. I thanked Lena Harding for taking a chance on me when others wouldn't. I acknowledged the community board for their trust and partnership, and I dedicated the award, silently, to all those who find themselves starting over, building new foundations when old ones crumble. After the ceremony, several small and mid-sized construction firm owners approached me about potential projects. Word had spread about what we'd accomplished at the Northside Arts Center with limited resources. My calendar filled with consultations. Verdant Spire Solutions was thriving. I'd hired 2 junior consultants and was considering bringing on a project manager. We'd moved from my tiny studio apartment to a small but proper office in a renovated warehouse, ironically, just a few blocks from where Thorn Timberworks had its main offices. The irony wasn't lost on me. My father had fired me from a company named after our family, and I had built a successful business named after a vision. It was during this period of professional redemption that news about Thorn Timberworks began circulating through industry channels. Their luxury condo conversion of what had been my Thorn Peak Vista project was facing serious problems: massive cost overruns, glaring quality issues, permit violations related to environmental commitments in the original approval. I took no pleasure in their struggles, but I wasn't surprised either. The Thorn approach, under Julian and Leo's leadership, had always been to promise big and figure out delivery later. Without someone detail-oriented managing operations, without me, those promises were becoming increasingly difficult to fulfill. Then came the call I'd both dreaded and anticipated for months. My mother's name on my phone screen, late one evening. "Alara, your father's had a heart attack." The world seemed to stop. Despite everything, the betrayal, the pain, he was still my father. Is he? He's stable. Her voice was choked with tears. They did emergency surgery, but it was serious. Alara, he's asking for you. I sat with that information for a long moment, the phone heavy in my hand. He fired me by voicemail, Mom, I reminded her, the bitterness rising. He let Julian and Marcus Sterling destroy my reputation. He cut me out of my own family without even a conversation. I know, her voice cracked. And I let it happen. And I'll never forgive myself for that. But he's still your father, and he might not have much time left. The hospital room was dim when I arrived, hushed and sterile. My father looked small in the bed, shrunken, frail, tubes and wires connecting him to various machines that beeped and hummed softly. My mother sat beside him, holding his hand, her face pale. Julian was noticeably absent, a gap in the family tableau. Dad's eyes opened when I approached, weary and clouded. Recognition, then something like shame, flickered across his face. Alara, his voice was weak, barely a whisper. Mom said you asked for me, I said, my voice carefully neutral, devoid of emotion. He nodded slightly, a slow, laborious movement. I did something unforgivable to you. I didn't disagree. I didn't offer easy absolution. Yes, you did. He looked away, his gaze fixed on the ceiling. I let fear drive me, fear of losing control, fear of the company changing too much, fear of becoming irrelevant. He coughed, a dry, rattling sound, and Mom helped him sip water through a straw. Marcus. He played on those fears, made me believe you were planning to push me out, to change everything we'd built, to destroy my legacy. I would never have done that, I said, my voice firm, unwavering. Everything I did was to strengthen the company you started, to make it future-proof. I know that now, he murmured, his eyes closing for a moment. Thorn Timberworks is in trouble, Alara. Serious trouble. Without you, we're not the same. Part of me wanted to savor this acknowledgement, this vindication, to say, I told you so. But it felt hollow, tinged with sadness. I'm sorry to hear that, truly, but I have my own company now. A ghost of a smile, a flicker of pride, crossed his face. I've heard. Verdant Spire Solutions, you're doing well. He opened his eyes, meeting mine. You're doing what I couldn't. Evolving, adapting, truly building for the future. We talked for nearly an hour, not just about business, but about family, about patterns repeated through generations, about how fear of losing control had cost the Thorn men the very legacy they were so desperate to preserve. It wasn't a perfect reconciliation. My father never explicitly apologized, not in the direct way I might have wanted, and I didn't offer complete forgiveness, not yet. But we reached a kind of understanding, an acknowledgement of what had been lost, and what might still be salvaged, not in business, but in family. As I was leaving, he said, his voice raspy, that message I left you, the voicemail, when you only replied understood. That was the moment I first doubted what I'd done. You didn't beg, didn't argue, just accepted it with more dignity than I'd shown delivering the news. It wasn't acceptance, I told him, meeting his gaze directly. It was the only power I had left in that moment, to deny you the satisfaction of seeing me break. He nodded slowly, a profound understanding dawning in his eyes. You're stronger than any thorn before you, Alara. You built something new from nothing. I've only ever known how to follow the path already laid. In the months that followed, our family began a cautious healing process. Mom and I renewed our weekly lunch dates, her quiet strength a balm to my still tender heart. Dad and I spoke occasionally, mostly about neutral topics at first, carefully navigating our new, fragile relationship, learning to build on a different foundation. Julian eventually apologized after the Sterling partnership imploded, leaving him to face the consequences of decisions he hadn't fully understood. He was lost, and for the first time, I felt a flicker of pity, not resentment. Thorn Timberworks survived, though in a diminished form. They sold off the troubled Thorn Peak Vista project to a developer who, ironically, hired Verdant Spire Solutions to consult on making it more sustainable, reclaiming some of the original vision. My father stepped down as CEO, taking on a chairman role with limited involvement in day-to-day operations. I declined offers to return to the family business. The bridges burned were too structural to be safely crossed again. But I did occasionally consult on specific thorn projects when asked, a professional courtesy that satisfied both sides without reopening old wounds. It was a new kind of relationship, defined by respect, not obligation. 2 years after the voicemail, I stood at a different construction site, the groundbreaking for Verdant Spire Solutions' first design-build project. We'd partnered with Lena Harding's firm again, this time to create affordable, sustainable housing for healthcare workers, a beautiful, community-focused development in a revitalized neighborhood. The project represented everything I believed construction could and should be: community-focused, environmentally responsible, economically viable, and deeply human. As I pressed the ceremonial shovel into the dirt, the earth cool and moist beneath the blade, I thought about foundations again. How they must be solid, yes, but also flexible enough to withstand shifting conditions, to adapt to change. How sometimes the strongest structures rise from cleared ground, from a blank slate, rather than patched ruins. The voicemail that had devastated me, that had ripped my life apart, had also, paradoxically, freed me. It freed me from the constraints of family expectations and traditional thinking. It freed me to build something that truly reflected my values, rather than compromising to maintain a fragile peace. It freed me to discover strengths I never knew I possessed, to find a resilience deep within me that only emerged when the external supports I'd relied on were suddenly, brutally removed. "You're out of the family business," my father had said. "Understood," I had replied, not as surrender, but as the first word of a new chapter, one I would write myself. That single word had been a commitment to myself, to my values, to my vision, a promise that I understood not just what I had lost, but what I could still create, that I understood my worth extended far beyond the thorn name, that I understood life's most important foundation isn't built of concrete and steel, but of integrity, resilience, and the courage to begin again. Today, as I look out at my team, wearing Verdant Spire hard hats, their faces earnest and dedicated, I feel a profound gratitude for that painful lesson. In losing my inherited legacy, I found my authentic path. In being cast out, I found my way home to myself. If you've ever had to start over after betrayal, after loss, I hope my story gives you courage. Sometimes our greatest strength emerges only when everything familiar is stripped away. Sometimes the most beautiful structures rise from the ashes of what we thought we couldn't live without. Thank you for joining me on this journey. If this story resonated with you, please share it with someone who might need to hear that survival, and even thriving, is possible after devastating loss. Leave a comment below about a time when you had to rebuild after something fell apart. And remember, sometimes understood isn't the end of the conversation. It's the beginning of a whole new dialogue with yourself about who you truly are and what you're capable of building.